so one of the tricks of maintaining gut diversity and reducing leaky gut is by using probiotics and prebiotics, which is why I was very excited when I first learned about all the things you guys do, that you have this mindset of improving gut health as part of overall bone health, because that is the pathology that's increasing their risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia, is the changes in the gut and the resulting changes of increased chronic low-grade inflammation, right? And that chronic low-grade inflammation comes from leaky gut. And so we need to address leaky gut in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause as well, because the gut diversity just continues to decrease over that period of time. But you can increase it by dietary changes, better exposure, probiotics, prebiotics, fiber, and so on.
If you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. It's a little red button. You punch that, and it's going to notify you every time we put out a new episode that can help you improve your bone health. And then also, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for the free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. That's going to walk you through everything you need to be doing right now to get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. After you do those two things, go ahead and press play on this episode, and I'll see you inside. Welcome to this episode of the Bone Coach Show. Joining us today to explore the microbiome, skin health, gut health, inflammation, and bone degeneration is Kiran Krishnan. Kiran is a research microbiologist and a health and wellness expert who aims to make complex information understandable to all. He has founded a number of successful health and supplement companies over the last 20 years, including co-founding and leading Microbiome Labs, the preeminent microbiome therapeutics-focused brand among health professionals. He is currently a co-founder and partner in 3 other companies that aim to revolutionize wellness care. He has conducted and published several research studies in scientific journals, has published chapters in scientific textbooks, reference books, has global patents, and is a sought-after speaker on human health and the microbiome. Kiran, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I've admired your work for such a long time, and it's an honor to really get to speak with you here. And I know we've got about, for everybody listening, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. Kiran's a busy man. I was able to tie him down for this period of time here, but we've got about 35, 40 minutes that we're going to jump into some really important topics relating to the microbiome, gut health, systemic inflammation, its impact on bone. We're going to get into the gut-brain axis, leaky skin, and skin health too. So you're going to want to stick around and pay attention to everything we're going to talk about here. Let's briefly dive into I want to hear about the journey to Microbiome Labs and how you came to lead this company. And it's a company that we've recommended their products in our programs for 5 years now. And they're fantastic products. So maybe you could talk about that journey briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also thank you for the support on the Microbiome Labs side. That's really the impact we wanted to make, was to create unique things that are well established and well researched, and then have a lot of supporters out there in the marketplace that care about people's health, helping expose it to the marketplace. So I'm a research microbiologist. I decided to leave the world of academic research because I saw this big crevasse, this gap, if you will, between the billions of dollars that go into academic research, where amazing work is being done, but research is being done for the sake of research, right? And every study perpetuates 10 new studies and so on. You just go deeper and deeper and deeper into a topic, and rarely does any of that work translate to something that impacts people. So there's something called a translational gap. There's a translational gap between really high-level academic research and then translating that information into products, services, therapeutics, and so on that actually help people's lives. I saw that gap when I was in academic research, and I said, okay, I want to build a career where I'm bridging the translational gap. I speak the science, I understand what's going on in the research world, but I thought that I had enough vision to understand how you actually move those technologies towards things that impact people. And that's how I got into the business world. So I'd founded several companies that did some portion of bridging the translational gap, whether it's bringing more smart research to finished products that based on academic work, or developing ingredients like vitamin K27. We were one of the first developers of vitamin K27 and the largest producers of vitamin K27 globally. Nattokinase, a number of ingredients that we developed based on existing academic research. And then finally, as the microbiome world started emerging, the NIH kicked off this massive, $180 million study with hundreds of research institutes across the world. We started to see information coming out on how microbes within your system impacted your overall health and wellness. And that's wonderful to know and understand the connections there with disease pathology and things that really affect people's quality of life. But then the big question was always, what do you do about it? Right? It's interesting that you know that. It's interesting that you know that there are microbes that can drive this pathology or microbes that can help that pathology. But how do you actually create effect and change using that information? So that's when I founded Microbiome Labs as a company to bridge that translational gap specific to the microbiome. And that's when we developed the probiotics, prebiotics, mucosal products, and all that. And then we started jumping into human trials, taking what was being studied in the academic space and then translating it immediately to humans and going, can we use this information to actually impact people's lives? And fortunately, that worked out well, and we've been successful in doing that.
As you've been studying the microbiome, what are the most interesting findings you've come across?
Well, so number one is that the microbiome is such an important storage of capabilities for us, right? And this is a part that people, unless you're deep in the microbiome world, you don't really understand or appreciate. So here's how it breaks down. We know that genes are required to conduct function, right? And the Human Genome Project that was kicked off in the early 90s, the idea there was to find the gene that drives every pathology and every biochemical step in your body, right? And they also were hopeful that for every disease state that we dealt with, heart disease and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and osteoporosis, that there was going to be a gene for it. And so it was early on estimated that humans would have somewhere around 250,000 or more functional genes in our system because we're very complex organisms. After the end of the Human Genome Project, we discovered we have 21,000 functional genes, right? And that might still sound like a lot, but keep in mind that an earthworm has about 30,000 functional genes, right? So we are far less sophisticated than an earthworm is in terms of our genetic capability. So then this created a huge gap in the understanding of what a human actually is when we go, well, how in the hell are we doing all the things we do, right? We're so sophisticated. We're so adapted to our environment. So that's part of the impetus that kicked off the Human Microbiome Project was, are the microbes in our system providing us genetic capability? So then, as it turns out, after the Human Microbiome Project was launched and data came out, that we have over 2.5 million microbial genes in our system that we use for functionality, right? So think about that comparison. 21,000 human genes, 2.5 million microbial genes. The vast majority of our functionality comes from the microbes. And if we didn't have these microbes, or we lose components of those microbes, we absolutely lose functionality and we cease to function as a human. A large part about being a human, maybe the largest part about being a human, is our ecosystem. And so there's a new term for a human. It's called a holobiont. A holobiont is defined as a superorganism, right? We are not just this collection of skin and bones. We are actually a walking, talking rainforest. We are a very complex ecosystem, and all of these ecosystems within our body, on our skin, in our circulation, in our gut, in our brains, everywhere, has to function and work together to perpetuate the health of the whole. This is why it's very easy to see now that the vast majority of chronic diseases can be traced back to some change in your microbiome. Because when the microbiome changes, the function of our system changes, and a change in the function leads to a disease state, right? So that's the most fascinating thing about the microbiome, is it controls virtually everything we do.
Now, when some people think of the microbiome, which by the way, that was very fascinating. When some people think of the microbiome, they only think that there's a gut microbiome, but
Right.
there is so much more to it than that. So are there different microbiomes or for different parts of the body? And if so,
Yeah.
how are they communicating together?
Yeah, so there are, and to give people a little bit of clarity on terms. So when we say microbiome, we're often talking about the totality of microbes, so all of the microbes in and on us, and all of their genetic elements. When we hone in on specific ecosystems, like for example, the microbes in the gut, we often refer to that as the gut microbiota. So the biota part is a way of distinguishing specific ecosystems, right? So the skin microbiota, the gut microbiota, the eyeball microbiota, the brain microbiota. So we have all these distinct ecosystems that are made up of different types of organisms, and it's not just bacteria. So it's predominantly bacteria, but we also have fungus, we have protozoa, amoebas, viruses, all of these things in our system. We have it in our cerebral spinal fluid, in our brains, in our circulation. We have them everywhere. And each of these ecosystems are unique in their functionality. And in fact, the ecosystem of an organ system determines the function of the organ, right? So, for example, our gallbladder, we know that the gallbladder stores bile and secretes bile into the small bowel during the process of digestion. It's a very important organ, right? But the microbiota of the gallbladder allows it to function that way. And if the microbiota of the gallbladder changes because of lifestyle, antibiotics, whatever it may be, then you start forming gallstones, and the gallbladder doesn't secrete bile the way it's supposed to. Then you get tremendous amount of inflammation and infections in the gallbladder, and then people get them removed. Right? The small intestine has a very specific microbiota. And as the small intestine microbiota changes, you end up getting SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. And it completely changes how the small intestine functions. And then that leads to nutrient malabsorption, chronic inflammation, aging. It can then lead to Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, dementia, all of these things just from a change in the ecosystem of the small intestine, right? And so that's the really important thing for people to absorb and understand, is that there are different ecosystems in different parts of the body, and each ecosystem dictates the function of that part of the body, including the skin, including the eyes, the brain, and so on. Now, what's fascinating about it is they all do talk to each other, right? The skin and the gut have to talk to each other. The gut and the brain have to talk to each other. They use our systems to talk. So they talk through our circulatory system, through molecules that they send to each other. They talk through the immune system, so they can translate messages from the gut to the lungs to the brain and so on through our immune system. And then they also have magical and mysterious ways of communicating that we still haven't elucidated, right? So there's ways that microbes likely communicate at the quantum level that we don't quite understand just yet, right? And that's a super fascinating area. So there's this whole emerging area called quantum biology. And that is how are these things communicating with each other at distances that are quite significant. For a microbe, the distance between the lung and the gut is basically the distance from the earth to the moon for a human. How are they communicating instantaneously in this system, through all of the checkpoints and all that they have to go through? So there's a lot of fascination around this, but fortunately, we know enough at the moment to start effectuating change in all these ecosystems to improve our health and improve our wellness.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I want to take one more minute to talk about if you are somebody who was newly diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, and you're at a point where you're stressed, you're worried, you're overwhelmed, you have no idea where to start or how to get started getting confident in your plan. I want to tell you about the Stronger Bone Solution Program. Over 5,000 people have come through this Stronger Bone Solution Program, and it walks you through the exact process you need to fill in the missing pieces, uncover critical things in your plan that you may not be aware of, and help you make modifications, adjustments, and tweaks to get you to the place where you're building stronger bones. I want you to get confident in your plan so that you can focus on living life and enjoying the life that you deserve with the people you love most. So if that's where you want to be, head over to bonecoach.com/apply and apply for our Stronger Bone Solution Program. right now. I'm bone coach Kevin Ellis. I want to see you inside this program. I want to help you get on the path to improvement and stronger bones. Hope to see you inside very soon. Let's get back to the episode. And let's talk about gut health, brain health, skin health. I know that's those are all really relevant topics for our audience. Let's talk about skin health for a second and the skin microbiome. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the skin has a very complex microbiome. You've got over 1,000 different species of organisms that can live on your skin naturally. They're made up of two different sets. So they're made up of basically resident microbes that are there all the time, and they're permanent microbes, and then transient microbes that basically hop on the skin. They can create a change, positive or negative, and then they hop off. They can also alter the concentration of the different resident microbes as well, which then has a consequence on what happens to your skin. Now, here's a really interesting thing to put this into perspective. There's a longevity study called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging. It's a very unique longevity study in that and an aging study. So it's not just longevity, it's also aging and the pathology of aging. What these researchers decided to do was they said, okay, to really understand the process of aging, we need to follow individuals for 50 to 60 years to see all of the choices they make, the effects that they create in their body, how all of that impacts age and aging and the dysfunction of the systems. And then what are the biomarkers and the indicators of risk of chronic disease and mortality, right? So it's a 50, 60-year study. And it's a very unique study because it's one of the only aging studies that has followed individuals over this length of time. Most aging studies, they take a cohort of older people and a cohort of younger people, say some people in their 80s and some people in their 30s, and they compare biological mechanisms. The problem there is that people in their 80s went through a lot of very different things in their 30s than the current 30-year-olds do, right? So it's hard to compare apples to apples. So this one follows each individual and their thousands of people. Here's what they found out that was super interesting. They were looking at all types of physiological changes that were the best predictors of chronic disease and mortality. The most potent and accurate predictor of chronic disease and mortality was aging skin, right? So aged skin, which is marked by fine lines, wrinkles, hyperpigmentation, dryness, thinning of the skin, and so on, all the things we don't want to happen to our skin, those were the best predictors of the development of chronic disease and mortality. Right now, most of us in our world would go, well, that makes sense because the skin is a reflection of an unhealthy inside. These researchers actually showed something different. They showed that the aged skin occurs first, and then the inside becomes unhealthy as a result of it, right? So then how is this all tied, and what sense does this make? Well, what they're showing is that the skin is a very important barrier. It's our most important barrier to the outside world. And as the skin becomes less of a barrier, as the functionality of the skin changes, we see it as aging of the skin. But what's actually happening is the skin is becoming leaky. So there's this concept of leaky skin where the barrier function of the skin is changing, and now that's driving systemic inflammation. They've actually been able to tie skin dysfunction, aging of the skin, to the start and generation of osteoporosis. They've actually been able to tie it to cardiovascular disease, to Alzheimer's, right? So what's actually happening here on the skin? Well, the first thing that starts to change is the change in the microbial ecosystem of the skin. Microbes play a very important role in maintaining the resilience and the barrier function of the skin. They help turn over the skin. They help regenerate new skin cells. They help alleviate senescent cells that are becoming zombie cells that aren't functioning. They're just kicking out, for example, melanin, so you get age spots. They reduce fine lines and wrinkles by improving collagen and elastin function. They reduce inflammation on the skin. They reduce the attack by pathogenic organisms on the skin. They maintain the pH so you don't get fungal overgrowth on the skin. So all the things that we see as age-related symptomology of the skin is a result of microbiome changes on the skin that also leads to permeability of the skin. This is why aging of the skin became such an important biomarker or indicator of chronic disease risk. So at the end of the day, if we can manage the skin microbiome and not allow it to change drastically and maintain some of the important resilience providing resident microbes, we can absolutely improve the image of the skin so it looks less aged and it looks more youthful and it's healthier. But ultimately, what it's doing is preventing leaky skin and reducing our risk of chronic disease, right? So that's a really, really new nuance that nobody, like for the generally in the health and wellness industry, we were not aware of. But the research around this is just starting to come out in 2023 and 2024. So now we're in an age where we have to look at skin differently, right? Skin is not just a facade that we want to beautify and beautify by any means necessary, right? Whether it's injections and Botox and plastic surgery and all that stuff, which is a way of just altering the facade. We actually have to look at the skin as an organ that is protecting us. And when this organ becomes dysfunctional, it actually leads to disease risk. So that's a really fascinating area to study as well.
So what are some of the ways that you found to support the skin microbiota?
Yeah. So a couple of simple things. Number one is starting to clean up personal care products, right? Most of our personal care products contain ingredients that really dismantle the skin microbiome, the beneficial microbes on the skin, right? So if you've got lotions and soaps and cleansers and toners and all of that stuff that have things like parabens in it, or sorbates, or phthalates, or fragrances, all of those things are volatile compounds that affect the health of the skin microbiome and reduces the beneficial microbes and increases the pathogenic microbes, which then start dismantling the structures of the skin. So that's one, is cleaning up your personal care products. I started about 3 years ago with the process of finding a clean deodorant that works well with my chemistry. It took me a number of trials and errors, being stinky for a period of time, right? But I ended up finding deodorant that works well for me. Then I went on to lotion and soaps and all that. So that slowly I started finding the most minimal products with none of those preservatives and all that works well for my biology. So that becomes an important thing for people to do. The second part of it is exposure levels to beneficial microbes, right? So one of the ways in which our skin microbiome maintains itself is by us getting exposure to outside microbes, right? Microbes in the dirt, microbes from pets, microbes in the natural environment. Just walking through the woods, going down a path actually exposes your skin to lots of transient microbes that actually effectuate change on the immune responses and the permanency of the beneficial resident microbes, right? So you have to be prescriptive about going outside, engaging with nature, walking, getting hugging a dog, getting exposure to natural microbes, and then also engaging with people, physical contact, hugging, and all of that exchanges microbes, which is a very beneficial thing. And then the last thing is we had developed a serum that is a quorum sensing serum that uses transient microbes that can hop on your skin, compete against negative bacteria, enhance the growth of positive bacteria, and modulate skin immune responses, whereby alleviating things like acne, for example, or redness and inflammation. And then we've also done studies on fine lines, wrinkles, age spots, UV damage spots, and all that, and saw that we can improve the biological age of the skin by 3 years in as little as 30 days, just by modulating the skin microbiome. So, cleaning up the personal care products, getting outside, more exposure to natural microbes in the natural environment, and then adding in a quorum sensing serum. We developed one called SIV, SIV, and that the combination of those three things can really improve the skin microbiome.
That's fantastic. And we'll link to, okay, so it's SIV. Where do you find this product?
www.civcare.com, SIVCARE. And then on Instagram, it's as CivCare. And we talk a lot about skin barrier, skin health in general. And incidentally, for women, because you use makeup, right? A lot of women use makeup and cosmetics. Cosmetics have never been designed to be good for the microbiome. But you're also not going to get women to not apply makeup. And that I totally understand, right? You want to look your best, feel your best, feel confident. One of the interesting things we've been able to see with Civ is you can actually use it as a primer before putting on makeup in the morning. So imagine you wash your face, you clean it, you add a couple drops of sieve as a primer on your face, so it adds a layer of protection, and then the makeup actually goes on top of it even better than it does on your natural skin. And we had this whole fashion show thing with supermodels and makeup artists and all that using it, and they were loving it. And then when you come home at night, you clean off your skin, you add another layer of sieve. Now you're really protecting your skin and adding that layer of protection. So that's something else to keep in mind as well.
Fantastic. So we'll link to that in the show notes, so you can get that down below the episode. And you mentioned quorum sensing. Now, this is something people in the audience may or may not have heard before. Can you explain what quorum sensing is, and then maybe talk about how the skin microbiota might communicate with the gut microbiota or other microbiotas throughout the body?
Yeah, absolutely. So quorum sensing is the ability of microbes to read each other's signatures, right? So there are some microbes that do this really well and other microbes that do it okay. It's the ability of a microbe to come into a complex ecosystem with thousands of other bacterial or fungal strains, and then start reading chemical signatures of each of these microbes to assess what the environment looks like. And then as a result of that, effectuate change, right? So pathogens do this as well. So the fascinating thing about certain pathogens is that they understand, for example, that the toxins they produce aren't concentrated enough to affect a change in the environment. So they will sit and wait till their concentration of their fellow pathogens increases to a certain level, where then they can all coordinate toxin production at the same time. Right? Take listeria, for example. Listeria monocytogenes is a common foodborne illness. If you get exposed to listeria and it enters into your system, it'll sit there and wait till the concentration of listeria is high enough where it knows it can make you sick by the release of the toxin. It's not going to release it before that because it knows that'll cause the immune system to be alerted and come and destroy the listeria before it has a chance to create a toxigenic event. Now, they can also cooperate with other pathogens in the area like Klebsiella or Pseudomonas and go, hey guys, there's enough of us around here. Let's all release our toxins at the same time and create a change in this ecosystem. Beneficial bacteria can do that as well. They can read the chemical signatures of toxin producers and pathogens, sit next to them, and actually compete with them for space and nutrients to kill off the pathogens. You know, the spores that we use in Megaspore, and in fact, on the sieve product, it's spores that we use on the skin as well. We did a study, actually 2 studies with Cleveland Clinic on how spores go after C. diff. Most people are familiar that Clostridium difficile is a really difficult to treat gut infection. But we did studies showing that the spores in Megaspore can actually knock down C. diff very effectively, right? And we figured out the mechanism of action, and it's super interesting. So when you put the spores in an environment where C. diff is at infectious level, what the spores do is they sense the presence of C. diff, they approach it, and they surround the Clostridium difficile colony. So imagine covered wagons surrounding this colony of infectious bacteria. Now, the Clostridium is very robust itself, so the bacillus can't produce antimicrobials to affect it. So what it's figured out is it produces chelating agents to starve the Clostridia of iron, because Clostridia needs iron in order to multiply and produce its toxin. So the spores have figured out that if we produce a chelating agent and squirt it in that area, we're going to starve out the Clostridia. And that's what it's done. Right? That's nature at its finest. It's mind-boggling as a researcher to me, because if you gave me $1 billion and the best researchers in the world, we couldn't engineer that intelligence, right? That is nature doing its thing for millions of years, and it's so elegant and amazing. So that's the power of quorum sensing. And what we really need to do is figure out how to enhance that for beneficial function, and rather than how pathogens use it in order to make us sick. Now, with that said, then how do microbes talk to each other, right? So let's take the skin and the gut as an example. The gut microbiome controls largely how the immune system works, right? The immune system in the gut, most people have heard the majority of your immune cells are in your gut. So the 70 to 80% of your immune tissue is actually in your gut. The reason for that is most of the things you get exposed to that will potentially have an internal effect will go through the digestive tract, right? You're either swallowing it through food or water or things that you touch and you touch your mouth, or it's going in through your eyes, ears, or nose, all of which drains to the back of your throat. And so anything that's caught in your mucus that you breathe in and all that gets moved up, and then you swallow that snot or mucus, if you will. So all of it is going into your digestive tract to be sampled by your immune system. So your immune system starts to gain intelligence of what your environment looks like. Your immune system is constantly trying to understand, what does the host environment look like? What are the pathogens? What are the antigens? What are the things that we need to be prepared for? So all that's coming through the digestive tract, 75, 80% of all your immune sampling tissue is in your digestive tract, where your immune cells are constantly trying to understand the world around you. But it's all doing that in the context of the microbiome, because it's the microbiome that provides the immune system with the intelligence to know what to attack and what not to attack. I've done 2-hour lectures on this topic called oral tolerance, right? But I'll summarize it in 2 seconds or 20 seconds, let's say. Your immune system's ability to understand what to attack and what not to attack is oral tolerance, because you don't want your immune system attacking benign things like food and environmental things like ragweed and pollen and all that. That leads to allergies, asthma, hypersensitivities, or food particles that leads to food intolerances, or your own tissue, which leads to autoimmunity, right? All those things are constantly at risk. So you want your immune system to understand not to attack those things, but you also want your immune system to go after things that could make you sick. That is called oral tolerance. The development of oral tolerance and the maintenance of oral tolerance is completely dependent on the microbiome, because the microbiome upregulates regulatory components of your immune system that shuts down unfavorable immune responses like hypersensitivities, food intolerances, autoimmunity, and it upregulates favorable immune responses like going after viruses, pathogenic organisms, and all that. So the immune system is constantly being trained by the microbiome. So imagine that your gut microbiome is dysfunctional. So you're losing oral tolerance. Your immune system is attacking things it shouldn't, right? At the same time, you've got a pathogen sitting on your skin that's producing toxins. That pathogen is eliciting an immune response as a result of your dysfunctional gut microbiome. That immune response is coming to your skin, that area of your skin, and just attacking everything in the region, including your own skin cells, your own collagen and elastin fibers and all that. So not only is it creating redness in your skin, it's creating a lesion, a dry, patchy, irritated lesion that a lot of people would call eczema or dermatitis or psoriasis, right? So you've got a pathogen on the skin, and you've got a dysfunctional gut immune system. So that combination causes an unfavorable response on your skin. You could have 2 people walking through the same environment with lots of different antigens hitting your skin. One person has complete tolerance of all those antigens. Another person could have the hives as a result of it, because of the disrupted immune function in the gut, eliciting the wrong response on the skin and the wrong microbes on the skin, triggering those responses as well, right? So that's just one example of how the gut and the skin is connected and how the microbiome affects both responses.
So interesting. Now, there's 2 other things I want to talk about. And I know we've got about 6 minutes, and then we want to let people know where they can find you. So let's talk about the immune system, systemic inflammation, and how those are tied into bone degeneration. And then after that, I want to talk about just Saccharomyces Boulardii, which is a mouthful for most people. They may have heard of it. They may not be familiar with it. How important is that? So let's start with what is the connection between the immune system, systemic inflammation, and bone degeneration?
Yeah. So what's really clear is that chronic low-grade inflammation, as marked by an increase in IL-6, so that's a cytokine that indicates inflammatory pathways are on, right? So that's interleukin-6. And then another one is called TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Both of those are ones that are being produced in large amounts by pro-inflammatory cells. So studies have shown that when you have an elevation of IL-6 and an elevation of TNF-alpha, you actually get an elevation of osteoplastic cells, which are the bone resorpting cells, right? And you get a suppression of bone building cells, which is osteoblastic cells. In order to reverse that, you need to reduce IL-6, reduce TNF-alpha, and increase something else called IGF-1. IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor 1, right? And that insulin-like growth factor 1 actually increases osteoblastic cells, which are the bone-building cells, right? So the immune system plays a very important role in this balance between bone resorption or removal of calcium and minerals from the bone versus bone building, which is the osteoblastic cells. Now, here's one of the things that occurs in women especially, and why menopause is associated with an increase in osteoporosis and osteopenia in women, is because their microbiomes tend to be more diverse when their hormones are during at the level of childbearing ages, right? And the reason for that is estrogen plays a number of roles in the body, but one of the roles it plays is by maintaining diversity in the gut microbiome. Estrogen actually feeds certain groups of bacteria in the microbiome and helps maintain diversity. So does progesterone, right? So when women have good, normal, healthy levels of estrogen and progesterone, their guts tend to be more diverse and less leaky. One of the things that occurs in perimenopause is estrogen and progesterone levels start to drop. As a result, diversity in the gut microbiome starts to drop, pathogen growth starts to increase, and their guts becoming leakier, right? So as you move through perimenopause, your gut is becoming leakier, which means that your IL-6 and TNF alpha levels start to increase, right? So this is in part why women also have a dramatic increase in cardiovascular risk once they reach menopause, because they now have an elevation of systemic inflammation, which is in part driven by hormonal changes that affect gut diversity, right? So that affects cardiovascular risk, it affects hormone balancing even further, and it affects bone loss and bone building. So one of the tricks of maintaining gut diversity and reducing leaky gut is by using probiotics and prebiotics, which is why I was very excited when I first learned about all the things you guys do, that you have this mindset of improving gut health as part of overall bone health, because that is the pathology that's increasing their risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia, is the changes in the gut and the resulting changes of increased chronic low-grade inflammation. Right. And that chronic low-grade inflammation comes from leaky gut. And so we need to address leaky gut in perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause as well, because the gut diversity just continues to decrease over that period of time. But you can increase it by dietary changes, better exposure, probiotics, prebiotics, fiber, and so on.
Fantastic. One last thing, Saccharomyces Boulardii. Yeah. What is it? Why is it beneficial? And what effect is it having when we take it?
Yeah. So Saccharomyces Boulardii is a fungal probiotic. And it's probably one of the most well-studied organisms in terms of its role as a probiotic. What's interesting about it is it doesn't really colonize for any period of time. Once you take it, it moves into your system and it does a number of things. One of the things that it does is it can upregulate anti-inflammatory cytokines. So IL-10, for example, or IGF. It can upregulate anti-inflammatory cytokines, so it can help with balancing inflammation. It actually upregulates your immune system's ability to find and detect infectious fungal overgrowth, so things like candida. So Saccharomyces boulardii can be really helpful in managing issues like candida overgrowth, which becomes more and more common as we use more antibiotics and so on. And then the other thing about Saccharomyces boulardii is it produces a lot of lactic acid. And lactic acid is really important not only to acidify the gut and maintain a healthier pH, which is good for the beneficial microbes. If the pH goes too high, the pathogens do better and the dysfunctional yeast and fungus do better. So Saccharomyces boulardii does help maintain the pH. The other important thing about lactic acid is it's the precursor to the development of short chain fatty acids like butyrate. And butyrate does a number of things, right? So number one, butyrate controls metabolism. So it improves fat burn, it upregulates GLP, which everyone knows now about GLP-1. It reduces postprandial blood glucose levels. It reduces inflammation. It helps stimulate fat burn throughout the body by activating something called AMPK. And then it also improves satiety hormone signaling in the brain. The other thing that butyrate and short chain fatty acids do is it improves calcium and mineral absorption, in the gut lining, right? So without adequate butyrate and short chain fatty acids, you're not going to be absorbing the calcium and things that you're taking that you're hoping will get to the bones, right? And so the production of short chain fatty acids is critically important. Saccharomyces Boulardii helps that with producing lactic acid and acidifying the gut and helping the butyrate producers flourish as well. So it's one of my favorite probiotics. I use it every day with the spores. To me, it's a foundational aspect, right? So, and if you think about the spores and Saccharomyces Boulardii with regards to our early ancestors, these were the original probiotics that our ancestors got inadvertent exposure to, because these organisms are ubiquitous in the natural environment, right? You're going to find Saccharomyces Boulardii on vegetation. You're going to find it on grasses. You're going to find it in the soil to a certain degree. Just like the bacillus spores, you find it in these ubiquitous environments. So as humans lived in these environments, ate food with dirt on it, picked and foraged things and dug for roots and tubers, they got adequate exposure to these organisms. So because of our genetic incapability that we talked about earlier on, we then outsource functionality to microbes in this case, and in this case in spores and Saccharomyces that do very foundational things in our gut. So we have to bring those back. To me, that's like nutrition, right? It's no different than needing to take proteins and polyphenols and healthy fats. We need these microbes in our system because over the course of evolution, we've outsourced very important functions to them because we don't have the ability to do it ourselves, right? So there are partners in crime here, and we need them to function as humans.
Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Bone Coach Show. If you're finding it helpful, please leave a positive rating and review. Hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast or the channel. That lets us help more people and reach and serve more people. And it also lets us know that this is helpful to you on your journey to better health and stronger bones. And then also, right down in the show notes, you can actually find a link to my free Bone Healthy Recipes Guide. That's going to give you access to some amazing and delicious recipes to support your journey to stronger bones. And then also, we have a link to my free Stronger Bones Masterclass in the show notes too. And that is the 3-step process that has helped people in over 1,500 cities around the world get confident in their plan for stronger bones. Over 110,000 people have taken part in this, and it's been really, really helpful for them. And I want you to have free access to it too. So add your name and email right down there in the show notes, get access to that free Stronger Bones Masterclass, and let's get you confident in your Stronger Bones plan today. Such a great conversation. This was so fascinating and interesting. I'm sure our audience learned so much from this. Kiran Krishnan, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I do want to let people know where they can find you, and let's point to the skin microbiome supporting product as well.
Yeah, so the product can be found civcare.com or on Instagram if you want to follow. The handle is @civcare. I put out a lot of work on my Instagram page, which is @KiranBiome, KIRANBIOME. And you'll find a lot of information and links and access to different things there. And I'll be releasing, so I've been doing a microbiome training course, actually, which has been a really fun live 5-module course to really teach people everything from foundation up on understanding their physiology, how everything works, what the role of the microbiome is, how everything goes wrong, and then most importantly, what you can do about all of this in terms of your diet, your lifestyle, supplement choices, and all that. That course will actually become evergreen and accessible to people starting in late January. So if they follow me on Instagram, I'll be posting about that if they want to educate themselves and become a little bit of a gut microbiome expert themselves, right? So that'll be a fun thing that's coming out as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again for your time, Kiran. And for everybody listening, you can find all the resources, show notes, everything mentioned today over at bonecoach.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, it's Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. Hope you found that episode helpful and that you enjoyed it. Just one last reminder, if you haven't done so already, head over to bonecoach.com, sign up for your free 7-day osteoporosis kickstart. It's going to tell you everything you need to do to start getting on the path to improvement. Hope you found this helpful. I'm your Bone Coach Kevin Ellis. I'll see you soon.